Well, breaking news right now on CBS News Philadelphia. A jury has just reached a verdict in the embezzlement trial of former labor leader John Dougherty as well as former union president Brian Burrows. Mostly all guilty verdicts for Dougherty, conspiracy and embezzlement. Burrows also guilty, conspiracy and embezzlement. We know that Joe Holden was inside the courtroom. He's been covering this trial from the very beginning. Let's hear from him now and get the very latest. Joe.
Hi, Natasha. You know what? Just simply a stunning defeat for John Dougherty as he sat there emotionless, listening to the foreperson for the jury return one guilty verdict after the next. At the heart of this case, it is embezzlement. It is the conspiracy to embezzle. And count after count, instance after instance that the federal government spent the last month asking a jury to weigh their evidence, to consider the wiretaps, the documents, the witnesses, all of this testimony. They found very few exceptions that John Dougherty had not embezzled and used Local 98's treasury for his own personal use. Brian Burrows, the longtime Local 98 president, no more, but Brian Burrows also convicted on virtually all counts that were filed against him. Again, the nature of the charges with the pair is conspiracy, a conspiracy to embezzle from Local 98 and the actual act of embezzling, of using the union funds to buy personal items and products, lots of trips to Target, unexplained credit card purchases that at times had Local 98 staff on Easter weekend cramming and trying to make legitimate sense of some of the expenses. Right now, I'm outside 6th and Market. We are waiting for both defendants to come down from courtroom 15A, as well as their defense counsel and federal prosecutors. At the very conclusion of the hearing, after the jury was dismissed, federal prosecutors raised the fact this is trial number 2 now for John Dougherty, where once again, there has been an overwhelming conviction, and given that he still faces a third trial on charges related to an August of 2020 extortion allegation, the federal prosecutor, in this case Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Costello, asked the judge to consider if you think that John Dougherty is a possible flight risk or a danger to the community. John Dougherty's defense attorney, Greg Pagano, got up out of his chair and said, look, John Dougherty's wife is very sick. She is a quadriplegic. He spends all of his time, virtually all of his time, caring for her, and that he has not had any questionable conduct in the time since the first trial and the second trial have begun and elapsed. The judge found that John Dougherty is not a flight risk, and the judge also concluded that John Dougherty is not a danger to the community. However, he cautioned if federal prosecutors believe that they should reconsider their motion for consideration to detain John Dougherty pending sentencing, then that would be heard by this court. We are again waiting for the parties to come out, and behind me right now, just some members of Local 98, those who have supported John Dougherty over the many weeks of this trial. One more footnote to all of this, the judge did set sentencing dates. John Dougherty up first on March 20th at 9 a.m. here in federal court. John Dougherty will learn his punishment, not only for the allegations now founded by a jury to have happened, allegations of embezzlement and findings of this jury of a conspiracy, but also going way back to when John Dougherty is accused of bribery, of using his power and his influence to exert the power that his union and that he had over a city councilman in the city of Philadelphia, and also other leaders and business leaders through the city of Philadelphia. So he will be sentenced March 20th on convictions related to those cases. That's part of this superseding indictment that was filed first in January of 2019. The remaining legal challenge for John Dougherty, the third, and at this point the last trial, is on that charge of extortion, which goes back to August of 2020. So as we wait here and things wind down in court, there was really little emotion. I was seated in a second row. I had federal agents to my left and a lot of supporters of John Dougherty to my right. Right before sentencing, right before the jury announced their verdict, the judge issued a very stern warning from the bench that this was a court of law and that things were very serious here. This is not the place, this is not the time. How are you? Not the place, not the time for any sort of outburst or reaction. Sir, did you have any reaction to the... No,
thank you.
You're a supporter of John Dougherty's, though?
I am.
Or a little shocked? Thank you for your time. I believe he said he is never shocked. But this man has been in court for most of the time as he walks down the street there in support of John Dougherty. And in the lead up to this afternoon, when we knew at 1 o'clock court was going to reconvene, not clear for what, as things progressed and more federal agents started entering the courtroom, it did appear that the jury had made some serious headway. And then our reporting from last night indicated that defense counsel had good ground, good standing, good belief that there was a verdict in an imminent way. We are being given some heads up here that federal prosecutors are coming out. Frank Costello in the red tie. Ed Spey, if you can go off me for a little bit here. I'm not sure if they're going to make any comment, but Frank Costello, again, dark suit, red tie, as he comes out. His co-counsel in the mask is B. Witzleben. They've been on both cases here, U.S. v. John Dougherty. See if they have any comment. Frank, can you tell us any comment from the government?
We do have a comment. I think Ms. Witzleben wants to address everybody first.
Sure, thank you.
We'll hold off for a minute.
Just let everybody have equal access to a microphone.
We are live, Ms. Witzleben, just so you know.
Thank you very much. So we did want to say that we're very gratified for the jury's verdict. Being a juror is a huge imposition on an individual, and it's a really important part of our obligations as citizens to accept jury service and to do it honorably. And this jury, as you know, was here many weeks. There were also a number of individuals who served as alternates who didn't even get to deliberate. We're very, very grateful for their service and their willingness to serve, and for how attentive and intelligent they were in their verdict. They upheld the principle today that it doesn't matter how powerful you are subject to being judged by a jury of your peers if you commit a crime. And they upheld the principle, as we put it in our case, the theme of our case, that it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you cannot take things that don't belong to you. I really also need to say I would be remiss if I did not mention the hard work of the public servants in law enforcement who put this case together. It is through their skill, their dedication, and their hard work that we were able to bring this case to a successful conclusion. So I want to give a shout out to the hardworking men and women of the FBI, the IRS, the Department of Labor, and all the other agencies that contributed. I also have to say a word about the career prosecutors who were involved in this case, some of whom have since retired. And one of them is here with us today. He's not retired yet, but Mr. Costello, and I'd like to see if he has anything he'd like to say.
I think she's pretty much said everything. We just basically feel that, you know, this took a while, but we don't give up, we don't go away. And as Jason Grinnell said in his rebuttal, this was a case where, you know, all the members who paid these people's salaries basically had their pockets picked by them, and we're glad we could finally hold them accountable for that.
Frank, in the end, the jury concluded what? What did they conclude?
Will you go ahead with the next charge against him, the next trial?
Yes.
And what did they conclude, Frank? I mean, the jury basically found that what? What was John Dougherty doing?
He was stealing from his members. That's what he was doing. Basically, all those charges relate to that, except for the LM2 charges, which basically, not only that, but the LM2, it's basically, they made it so not only were they stealing from the members, but the members had no way of knowing it.
This was a long time coming. This was the second part of a 116-count indictment. Just talk about the effort that it took to bring these in, the years apart that it took. Well,
let me see. I think the last week I slept maybe 5 hours a night. Jason slept 4 hours a night. Anthony slept 3 hours a night. He didn't sleep at all. It was a lot of work. In fact, Rich Barrett, who's over here, has been on the case from the beginning. I got assigned to this case in January of 2015. I've pretty much been working on it full time since then. It takes a lot of work. The FBI worked tirelessly. Nobody really sees all that, and that's where the case really gets won or lost. And it's not just me. We have a whole team.
Frank, Mr. Grinnell said that in the actions here that this man was taking a company credit card, swiping it. He said the theft happened at the swipe and that these were used for personal reasons. Is it that simple?
You can ask him. He's right here.
I know.
Jason, you want to comment?
Is it that simple, sir?
It was good old-fashioned theft. And I think the jury saw through that and they convicted him of it.
Good old-fashioned theft.
Do you think there was some key piece of evidence that really landed this verdict?
I think it was just an accumulation of things. It takes a long time. Everybody likes to talk about a smoking gun. A lot of times there isn't any. It's just a lot of different things that all fit. So the answer, that's a long way of saying no.
What's the value of the wiretaps that you played extensively in both trials?
Well, it's huge because it's their own words, and it's really immeasurable. And I want to make it clear, you know, everybody thinks we live in a surveillance state. It takes a lot to get this. It takes a lot to operate it. There's certainly a lot of limitations on it, which there should be. But again, let's go back to your question, immeasurable.
All right, thank you.
And you ultimately decided not to use the recording.
All right, there is Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Costello. Sir, do you have me get some comment on, this is Brian Burrows' counsel?
Sure.
What do you make of what you've seen here?
You know, we're obviously really disappointed. I think that we felt like we had a really good shot for a lot of these counts, especially the conspiracy count. I mean, frankly, we just don't think that the evidence was there to convict them. But we're hopeful. We're going to appeal, at least that, but we're still thinking about what our strategy is.
You said that the evidence wasn't there, yet they absolutely hammered your client here.
Sure, they did. They did. But, you know, sometimes you get a good jury, sometimes you get a bad one.
How's your client doing?
He's doing well. He's upbeat. I mean, you know, this was always a possibility, of course, but it's on to the next, and we're definitely going to take an appeal, and he's focused on that right now.
Where do you think your appeal is?
On the conspiracy count, primarily. You know, we think that the evidence just wasn't there to show that Brian was part of all those pieces of the conspiracy. I mean, think about the avalanche of evidence that came in that really had nothing to do with it. You know, I mean, his part of the case was the Tony Massa contractor conspiracy. He had nothing to do with anything else. So to say that he's part of a conspiracy with, you know, all that other stuff, the expenses, the tickets, the trips, all that stuff, really has nothing to do with him.
Was he brought down by Dougherty, his association with Dougherty?
No, I don't know. I don't know. I'm hopeful that the jury considered each of them individually. I'm not going to comment on that. But, you know, I think there's some introspection warranted about what the government really achieved here. After 10 years of this and millions of dollars, what did they do? What did they do?
They just convicted John Dougherty twice, and the president of the union. That's what they did.
They moved off the board a powerful union that fought for working people. And if you think the 4,700 members of Local 98 are better off today than they were before, then you're fooling yourself. So, thank you so much.
One more time.
Your name for the record,
so we have it.
Mark Kasten, M-A-R-K, K-A-S-T-E-N.
Thank you for your time.
Well done.
It's Mark Kasten, obviously, counsel, as you've been hearing, for Brian Burrows, the co-defendant in this case. Left to exit the courthouse here is John Dougherty. It is unclear if he will speak. Natasha, we've been going out here for some time. We've heard a lot of comment from the assistant U.S. attorneys, and that was Frank Costello, B. Witzleben, and Jason Grinnell. You heard my reference to one of what was a resounding moment in court when Grinnell said you cannot use a business company card for personal expenses, and the swipe happened at the theft. John Dougherty exiting court. We're going to make our way over there. We have a camera over there. Natasha, as we work our way over there, any thoughts from what you've heard? Because I know, having sat in this trial, it was clear there was a lot of money moving back and forth. Let's go ahead and listen to John Dougherty. Thank you.
Okay.
We have pre-trial or post-trial motions from the first trial that still need to be litigated. We have another trial coming up, so there's a lot more to litigate in this case.
Great. Now, Mr. Dougherty, you are able to stay at home until the sentencing. Does that bring you any sense of comfort?
No, it's just, look, let's talk about the trial. The trial was a complicated case. It was even complicated, obviously, for my professionals. The jury elected to believe Tony Massa. The case was over. You know, the minute they believed Tony Massa, the case was over. So, I mean, everything else just fell in line. It was, of course, once you believe the first one with Tony Massa, he just checks the boxes. So, you know, we have a lot of things to consider, but we respect what happened, and we'll move forward. We always do.
The government's 2 for 2 right now. I mean, are you concerned about your future at this point, and do you plan to appeal?
Well, listen, we've got a good legal team. I got a couple open-ended issues we got to handle. Right now, I'm just going to get home to Celia and do what I do.
Emotionally, talk about the judge bringing up the fact that you are caring for your wife. He didn't find you to be a flight risk or a danger to the community.
It's the worst kept secret in Philadelphia. That's what I do. For 6.5 years, I haven't done anything but stay at home with Celia, and that's what I do. I don't bring it up. You know, I don't use it as an excuse. I never used it as a crutch. That's what I do. You know, so.
Did you spend union funds, and did you realize when you were doing so?
Well, listen, we're going to go, but that's not the question. I told you the question was they believe Tony Massa, and the case was over then. You know.
Emotionally, how are you doing right now?
I'm fine.
Hey, John, are you resigned that maybe you're going to serve some federal time here, John?
Hey, listen, I answered all your questions. Headed back to go home. You know where I'm headed. That's what I'm going to do. Okay? I couldn't be more square with all you guys. You know. So that's everything. I gave you every answer you needed.
I'm sorry, but we weren't.
Yeah, we'll do that. Check. Greg will give you all the answers there. Stop. You got it.
All right, so there you go. I'm not sure if you guys can still hear me, but we are obviously watching John Dougherty get into his car here. He does not want to speak anymore. When asked directly if he did steal Local 98 funds, that was the end of the interview. I'm now looking for my photographer, Ed. Right here, Ed, thank you. So defense counsel Greg Pagano, he represents John Dougherty. He is walking down the sidewalk. It does not appear he wants to address what just happened in court. John Dougherty, typically very vocal about his history with Local 98. It looks like Mr. Pagano might stop and offer some comments. Thank you for waiting, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, go.
Tell me
Give
when
us
you're
one
ready.
moment here.
Hey, Hank, come over here.
Greg, we are streaming live just for your information.
We disagree with the jury's verdict, but we respect their verdict and their decision, and we have several other matters that we need to litigate in this case, such as post-trial motions from the first trial. We have a second trial coming up. We have a sentencing coming up. So there's a lot more fight to engage in this case, and a lot more litigation. So we'll see where that takes us.
Well, you disagree. It was overwhelming verdict against your client.
We disagree that with the verdict, we don't think that John had criminal intent to commit any of these offenses.
What do you think the weakness in the case was that led the jurors to decide this way?
I think it hinged on the credibility of Anthony Massa, and if the jury believed him, then the rest of the case is easy, and that's what they did.
How much time behind bars?
I don't know. I didn't review the guidelines yet, but I will before.
Do you see
decades?
Do you see appeal?
No, not decades.
Do you see an appeal on this case?
Possibly, yeah.
Where?
Yeah. Well,
where?
I'm going to have to look at all those issues. I can't comment on that right now.
All right, that is Greg Pagano speaking right there. He is defense counsel for John Dougherty. As you heard, he's now going to research where he may find, in their estimation, where the jury got this wrong and how they may have grounds for an appeal. Let's go ahead and hit the big reset button. We've heard from Greg Pagano, we've heard from John Dougherty, we've heard from attorneys for Brian Burrows, and we've heard from federal prosecutors. At the very end of all of this, the jury concluded that John Dougherty used Local 98 funds for a period of years to finance his personal lifestyle. You've heard the name Anthony Massa, the government's chief witness, who was able to, through his own well-kept records, tie these crimes together, using Massa to do renovations, elaborate bathroom renovations. Was it, in the end, all just a scheme to embezzle? That's what prosecutors contended. You heard the assistant U.S. attorney, Jason Grinnell, say it was old-fashioned theft. Very basic, very simple. We were doing some calculations with our sources throughout the week here. We've been playing sit, wait, and watch. Some of our sources say with John Dougherty's exposure from the first trial, with convictions on bribery, now second trial, convictions on conspiracy and embezzlement, they figure the guideline, the range may place him a possible exposure of some 8 years. It's up to the judge. The prosecution will have what's known as a sentencing memorandum to put together. But Natasha, lots developing out here. What are your thoughts?
Well, lots of thoughts here, Joe, just watching you navigate this situation there outside of court. A flurry of activity just all happening just after this verdict took place. We finally did hear from John Dougherty himself there with his defense attorneys flanked by his side. Tell me a bit of what you're thinking here. You said he had no emotion inside the courtroom. You heard him there outside of the courtroom, again mentioning Anthony Massa, saying if you believed him, the case was over. I didn't have a chance in a sense, but also tell me a bit more about his demeanor, just what you've seen him from the very beginning. You've been following this case just right now and talking to him after this verdict. What are your thoughts about his demeanor and how he's feeling about this verdict?
Well, you know what? I always appreciate being able to tell the backstory. And so with no disrespect at all, let's set the scene. It's 5 minutes to 1, and there is a very intense sort of gathering, believing that a verdict had absolutely been reached. It's dangerous to assume that it's a verdict. It could have been something else, where we were all gathering in 15A, and the federal agents are really filling the room over to my left, and on my right it's John Dougherty supporters. John Dougherty himself began to greet some of the folks who had not been here in the previous days and weeks. He embraced a young woman, clearly a friend or family, and then it was kickoff. The judge comes in, takes the bench, and says that the jury has indicated that they've reached a verdict. And all of this happening somewhat dramatically, but almost like a play, theater, where the jury then comes in. We have questions among the 12 people who have sat there, and there are many alternates as well. Who's their foreperson? All of this then reveals in very quick pace. The foreperson stands up, identifies himself. He has a slip, and he goes through count by count by count. And if you are good at doing your homework, you understand that this count is conspiracy. This is embezzlement. This is wire fraud. There's another embezzlement. Over and over, several dozen counts here. John Dougherty went down today on several dozen federal counts of embezzlement and the conspiracy to embezzle and all other associated crimes at this point. So there's the story. We are going to work to distill it down and have a full picture for you at CBS News Philadelphia when we start live on the air at 4. Natasha, we'll send it back to you.
Joe, we do appreciate all of your great reporting and your recap of this flurry of activity out there outside of the federal courthouse in light of these guilty verdicts for both of these men. We do appreciate that. We're going to hear much more from you coming up at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much, Joe. We're going to have much more on this breaking news just ahead on CBS News Philadelphia at 4. We'll see you then.